Welcome to the Body Science Podcast. As always, the information contained in this podcast is for the information purposes only and is not designed to diagnose or be prescriptive to treat, prevent, or manage any injury, disease, or other health-related condition.
Welcome to Body Science HQ, the world of fit, happy, healthy. And I'm really digging this topic today. We're going to talk about, and I'm one, dads with daughters that play sport. Now, we have two special panelists on today. Both have had a long history here at Body Science in some way or another. Max on board. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Good to see you.
Do you want to drop in how we sort of got associated like a few years ago, just so people sort of understand why you're sitting next to the guru?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not me. I'm not talking about Kyle when I say that.
Yeah, I was a touring musician under the guise of Kid Mac and a filmmaker. We had a TV show called The Crew. In amongst our peers, Body Science was sponsoring a lot of the footy clubs like Sutto's, Rabbitohs back in the day. That's how we first got acquainted through the Body Science family, and over time got involved in a lot of activities and events with Body Science, and then they partnered up with us on The Crew, and we were fortunate enough to travel the world together and see some amazing things, some of which included NBA games, Playboy Mansion, and the rest stays on tour.
Yeah, it's a podcast in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been 10 years.
It has been a long time. And Kyle, you've you're part of the Body Science family now, but you come from a rich history in sport as well.
Yeah, so I spent the past, 15 years of my career working with athletes all over the world, athletes, teams, Formula One teams, that sort of thing. And my way into Body Science was actually via Mac. So Mac was the one who kind of made the connection, almost a decade ago now. And then, I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, it's been fun. And you guys are really keen to talk about you've both got young daughters.
We do.
And you're both really heavy in sport. And we want to talk about that topic, like being a dad, and how do we manage the expectations of the world right now in relation to, like, mate, you got a Brazilian background. Yep. So you obviously football is your thing.
Yep.
And you're a soccer loving, we'll use soccer for us Australian people, you're a soccer loving sporting dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, born and bred.
At 7, you're playing mixed sport, aren't you?
Yeah. So my daughter Aura, who's sitting with us here, 7 years old, we're living in Byron. She plays in a little mixed comp. There just wasn't enough girls to make a full girls team. So
was that before the Matildas came on this year and did their thing?
Pretty much. And this was like, the season started March. The World Cup, Women's World Cup was middle of the year. So halfway through the season, everyone stopped to watch the Matildas play, which basically changed the entire landscape. And what the participation levels were at the start of the season, all of a sudden, kids came out the woodworks trying to join the clubs halfway through, which was too late. And then we saw this ability to create a follow-up season next year, of which I've started recruiting so we could get an all-girls team. I've got my theories around how we could potentially get the girls way more invested in the sport early, which I think is key. So right now she had a season where she'd come up against a whole team of boys who have been, every spare minute of lunchtime at school, they're kicking, they're running, they're just more active with a ball at their feet, which it's that whole 10,000 hours thing with soccer. It's, you really have to do your time, and they just do it at an early stage. And the girls, they're mixing up their activities throughout their younger years. So the boys are at that age, you'd have to say more advanced, to the point where they come up against a team of boys and it's a whitewash, and it's not great for them. They go home not really keen to come back the following week. Mind you, there's some really good talent in amongst the girls, which is great to see. So for me, it's just like, all right, well, recruit some girls, make an all-girls team, play against other girls equally as keen to battle. And then at that point, you can really start to see where they are skill level-wise and start to work out where they need improvement. And this more so their confidence level keeps going from, strength to strength. I think that's the important thing.
I love the way you use the word battle then too. Like it's not a thing you traditionally, as a dad, and I'm an old dad too, you guys are young dads. So as an old dad, probably wouldn't say I'd use the word battle with my daughter a lot. I mean, she battles with me every day now because she's way more intelligent in that space. But it's really nice to hear a dad talk about their daughter and sport and still use the word battle.
Yeah. Look, I just think there was a lot of, terms used this season in the kids sport about having fun, it's participation. And I think we're probably a little bit from the old school mentality that I think it's important for kids to win and lose and get hurt and bounce back up and understand that there's repercussions for mistakes, or that there's room for improvement where needed. And that whole idea of just playing for the sake of playing and no points and no winners, I don't necessarily agree with that. And I think playing soccer my entire life has taught me so much about business, about relationships, friendships, just mental battles, and just goal setting. And I think it's key for the kids to learn that at an early stage. The earlier the better. That's the real world out there. If they want to succeed in anything they do, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think without having that consequence of losing, it's really hard for a kid to celebrate the elation of actually a win and understanding the significance of achieving something. If you're kind of encouraged to play in this middle ground, I don't want to use the term mediocre, but like it's almost like celebrating average, and it's like you kind of want more for your kids than that. And while it's great to make sure that everything's inclusive and everybody has a really good time, I think there's so much that you can learn from the consequences of winning and losing.
Why do you think we attach participation awards to sport?
I think
Like,
it's
we're not
just
doing that in maths and we're not doing that in English. Why are we doing it with sport?
Actually, it's a good question. I don't know, and I'd like to talk about it for a minute, but I think Australia is pretty sport crazy, and there is so much involvement on weekend sports on every code, and this whole idea of like making it very family friendly was introduced quite recently, I'd say in the last like probably decade, which to me is strange. But yeah, I don't know why it's there.
Yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I think it's really important to make sure that, like, it goes without saying, sport to me is probably the most inclusive thing there is, right? Like, there is a sport for everybody. There's adaptive sports, obviously, across genders, like we're talking about today. But I think maybe we took it a little bit too far. In a sense of just going, well, let's take the fun out of it for the kids by assuming that if we just make it all about fun, we're doing the right thing. But actually, like when you think about that elation of scoring a goal as an example, right? And that feeling of running across the try line. Like I remember my very first game of rugby when I was 12 and actually scoring my first try and knowing that I'd contributed something significant to the team where we would actually go on to win, how much that meant to me. And I just want to now, with my daughter, obviously she's only doing little kickers at the moment, so it's very much that sort of fundamental skills acquisition phase of whatever sport she decides to go into, but whether she actually is going to get to experience that through those formative years and whether that then actually has an impact on what sports those kids choose, whether that ends up being something in a team environment or whether that naturally starts to push kids more towards individual sports where there is a really clear winner or loser, and what that impact has. I don't know, but it does feel a bit weird, and I'd love to understand the psychology behind it a little bit more, because I'm hoping that it's founded in psychology and not just an emotional decision that we kind of lost grip with.
And Little Kickers is...
So Little Kickers is like a weekend program for kids between the ages of 18 months and 4 years old to learn the fundamental skills of soccer. But
So it's soccer again, yeah.
Yes, correct.
So do you think, and here's a question I want to throw out there, do you think that women's sports got a real challenge by the dominance of the Matildas showed this year? Like I did not see that coming. Did you see? I mean, you're massive, but did you see it coming?
Not to that level. I saw a surprise package coming. I knew the Matildas had a strong squad. I was concerned that the rest of the nation wouldn't pay attention. That was my fear, because I thought this was our best chance at winning a World Cup. But the results just kept getting better through the group stages into the, final 16 and whatnot. And then the ratings were just nuts, like, I remember when I must have been like 10 or 11. It was a World Cup 94, but Brazil beat Italy in the World Cup final. It was in the USA. That was like the defining moment for me wanting to pursue a football career. Just the stars, the age that I was.
It changed your life that much?
Big time. Romario was the striker, and I just wanted to be like that guy. But basically, because we're both brown and short status. Just the ability to like see what a game could do to, and like our whole family and our whole community would gather around this TV, and like just the happiness it would bring. It just changed my life. And I think the Matildas World Cup did that for a lot of young girls, particularly my daughter who's 7, and our entire community, like all our neighbours got together and they all had young girls, and we all watched it together, and all of a sudden everyone wanted to kick a ball, and everyone knew the players and wanted to be the Mary Fowler or the Sam Kerr. And I just thought that was a turning point. It was a turning point. It took me back to when I fell in love with football and wanted to pursue it. So I am surprised in how much it took Australia by storm, but it's about time, and I think we had the stars to do it and the results to follow.
And Cole, is that why, because your daughter says, why aren't the Matildas playing? Unless she doesn't understand programming and things that you do, but is that why you're in soccer as well?
I think for me it's sort of similar to Max. Obviously my daughter's 4, so our world is all consumed by Bluey and Paw Patrol. And the Matildas is the only thing
You would have loved the
that
Matildas
actually
coming in
took her attention away from that. And it became this discussion about, when are the Matildas playing next? Can we go watch the Matildas? Where are the Matildas? And I think what it was for her is obviously, because we sit and watch sport all the time together, but this was the first time that she actually saw something on TV that was representative of her playing a sport that she absolutely loved. And like to Mac's earlier point around the ratings and everything like that, what was really special about that time, from my perspective anyway, with the Matildas World Cup campaign this year, was we had Tim Cahill's qualifying goal almost every second night for weeks on end. Like, I was looking at the numbers last night, and the final shootout for the girls did the same numbers as the AFL Grand Final, the men's AFL Grand Final. So when you think about the fact that that was still very much like that was a stage game, right? That wasn't even the Grand Final. That wasn't the piece de resistance of the entire thing. That was still just part of the journey. And to have that momentum, like I can't think of anything else other than maybe the Olympics, and like thinking back to like the Australian swimming team, the Dolphins, and when there was just that really dominant era, or athletes like Kate Campbell in the last Olympics that just dominated. Like, we've gone from having these moments, and complete caveat here, this is an observational dad's look at this. This is not coming from a female perspective whatsoever. This is just my observation. But we've gone from having these moments maybe once every 4 years when an Olympics rolled around and you had the likes of Jess Fox or whoever, to this is something that's happening almost weekly now, where you've got these incredible female athletes dominating, and the conversation, I feel, is quite positive, because it's turning to them being an athlete, and we're no longer trying to delineate and go, well, this is female athletes or male athletes. Like, there's this broader, I guess, social acceptance that women's sport's not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and they are just as competitive, if not more competitive. And arguably, if you're putting Australian athletes up against the rest of the world in terms of how Australian athletes have performed this year, the girls have dominated the men.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there. Do you, as dads, how do you separate yourselves from male sport and female sport in that same, like, you're talking Matildas football and you're also talking Brazilian football team. There is a massive gap of years of a lot of money put into men's sport and the programs that have created male sport to be what it is. How do you play in this space as a dad and explain to your daughter there that she can be in the future based on, I mean, I'm stepping back to where the Matildas are. Like, what they've done for Australian sport is just incredible, and probably the number one biggest thing that's ever happened in Australian sport in history. How do we drive these young females to believe that that can happen across all sport, not just soccer? I mean, it's really easy to throw a soccer ball in front of a kid because they can start kicking it straight away. Like, and if I can step back to Jess for a second, you talked about, like, there's another incredible athlete that you did a whole lot with leading into the last Olympics, but she did a sport that not many people can go and do.
She did. Yeah.
And what did that mean for you as dads and where sport goes versus what the Matildas have done and the Lions have just done? And
so if we use Jess as an example, Jess's was purely environmental, right?
Yeah.
So her dad was previously the greatest paddler of all time. Yeah. And then it was her mum, and then it was Jess. So I think the real lesson in this is just being the parent there that can provide the best possible environment for your child to succeed, male or female, in the things that they want to pursue. And I think really that's all it is. So I think that comes back to that point earlier around setting them up with realistic expectations. Not everything is a participation trophy. Not everything is just for the love of it. For sure, you want to make sure that they're always loving it, but at the same time, you kind of want to set them up for success the best possible way you can. And I think if we put more of an effort into that as a society, and for sure you can get into the argument around viewership and sponsorship dollars and all that sort of stuff. But if you take it back to, say, the NRL, right? So even back to the late 80s, there was still male NRL players that were working jobs and playing football. Yep. So there is proof there that with the right commitment from society and from the community, that we can actually drive meaningful change, right? So surfing, tennis, a lot of these individual sports now have equal pay opportunity and things like that. And it's shown that, like, Serena Williams will do the same numbers as, say, Roger Federer in terms of viewing audience and everything like that. So I think that old argument of, well, it only does this or only does that has been very quickly kind of stamped out by the Matildas. But if we don't make that commitment, it's all still obviously at risk.
Yeah, no, commitment's such a big word and a key word to use in this scenario. Like, I feel like how you parent your kids, you know, I think at these early stages, like Kyle said, it's really about supplying the tools to allow them to try different things, see what they're good at, what they enjoy more. And then when you start to hone in on something, I think there needs to be some sort of accountability and commitment at some point. I'm finding that a lot of the young kids in this generation, they're just wanting to fluff between a lot of different things, and they're like, don't really want to focus on one for a while. And I think there is that tricky part, that grey area as a dad, where you can see some promise in one area and you want to push them, but not push them enough where it just turns them off. Like surfing, for example, I love taking Aura surfing, but, you know, as a dad, just started taking it a little bit too far and pushing her on ones that just nosedived, and then she just didn't want to go back for a while. So you really got to tread lightly. But without that commitment, like, I got one of my best friends, we grew up playing at a very high level soccer together, and now he's got a 10-year-old boy who is incredible, small little nippy kid, and they've just come back from Europe for a couple of trials over there, and he's at that point where he's like, I don't know if I'm pushing him too hard, but I don't know if that's what's needed. And if I look at anyone who we grew up playing with, like Tim Cahill, you know, and his brother Chris, like all these guys who we all could see there was possibilities and avenues to make it, it was the ones that really got pushed and committed. And so it's just, there is that fine line. And I think you got to forgive yourself a little bit if you feel like you want to take the route of pushing and helping them commit and supporting them, and just understanding when they need rest. And so, yeah, I guess that's one thing I think that we'll have to navigate as dads, particularly with girls, is just find that balance.
That's a big thing too, because a balance for a female is very different to a balance for a male.
Correct.
When you look at what drives a young boy, and like, you know, they've just copped one on the head, or there's get up, rub it off, you know, what my dad did to me, here's the magic sponge, you'll be all right, get back out there, versus sitting there and seriously looking at, is this what this kid really wants? It's being pulled off the ground and told to run back out.
Yeah.
And that's where I was heading to before on this sports side, was with the Matildas and the success, it's really easy to grab a round ball and run around and kick it. Like, do we think that other female sports are going to suffer from the growth of one sport doing extremely well in viewership as a whole versus, like, if you love rugby league, you watch the women's league, and rugby league is great. Watch the sevens, it's great. I'm not a real soccer football fan, so the Matildas, to me, it was great to see Australia do what it did, and it was great to see, I've been in sport for a long time, I could not believe the pull that they had. Like, my daughter and my wife bought tickets to go, we get tickets to everything at Body Science. They bought tickets on their own to go and watch a game.
And chose to go, yeah.
You know, we have corporate boxes, everything. My daughter never comes to any of it. And I had a real wow moment. Like, I just thought, this is incredible. And I've been challenging myself a lot on, because we didn't have, we had soccer for 6 months as growing up, but basically I played league and union, so we were straight into league and union. I just challenged myself on the fact that what is the power of one going to do to the power of the sport? Like, and if I can clarify that so I don't sound like an old male that's talking about women and male sport, I've invested in female sport for a long time at Body Science. Way longer, way before it was cool to do that. And I mean that in a way where a lot of brands just jump on because it's cool to do now. We've been in female sport for a long time. So we've been a real part of that journey. And I've got some of my favourite things in this company are things that happened back years ago in that space. Right now, I look at, like, can you guys tell me what the score of the Lions final was when they just won the premiership?
Yeah, you're right.
You can tell me what the Matildas, you know,
yeah.
Like, I'm really worried that, and like, this is, and I'm talking at the same level of like transgender sport, and I don't want to go there today because that's not what we're about, but that same thing, the Matildas are so powerful now as a sporting unit. What does that do for sport? Like, and you mentioned before about, should I push them in one direction? I know I'm going around the long way on all this, but I've got a lot going through my head right now. Should we be looking at how do we leverage this to make this so great for the future of female sport, or do we go, let's grow soccer in Australia? Like, what is it?
I would just say, like, anything in life, like in business, whatever, you see, like, you know, another sport supplement company explode and do something amazing over here. What does it do to you? It inspires you. It makes you want to either act on something to compete against it, or work out how they did what they did because you want to follow in similar footsteps. It's just like me. I have a TV and film production company. When I see a young filmmaker, you know, on the eve of releasing a new film, like, oh, that's amazing. I love that. Everyone's paying attention to that. How did he do that? Let's find out how he did that. And if this is something that we can do to get to that same scenario. The Matildas, being up on that pedestal, I think other brands and other codes, it's only going to inspire them. They're probably going to look at that and think about, well, what can we take from that to grow what we're doing? And I think it's a domino effect. It might take time, but I think the short answer from my perspective is it inspires others to act. And I think that's the beauty of what they did.
I love that. Cole, you've probably got the next gen coming. What'd you say? You're playing 18 months to 4 year footy at the moment?
18 months to 4, yeah.
And is that, are you doing that because you love soccer, or you think it's the safest sport for your child? And I'll use the word child instead of daughter here.
So two things. One was obviously she asked to do it.
Wow.
So she wanted to do it. And then the second thing is it's really the only sort of established format for kids of that age.
Okay.
And so naturally, I think to Mac's earlier point about taking those learnings is not just taking the learnings from that 6-week period where we had the World Cup. Think about that entire journey from the first moment that someone is exposed to that sport. So yes, the fundamentals of kicking a ball around in the playground, right? Round ball playground, really simple, really like rudimentary fundamental skills. And then they've built a framework around that. So whether it is through little kickers and so I think it's probably the most non-contact sport, right? Yeah. So I guess there's a big part of that where there is less of an aversion from parents to put their kids into something at that age than say maybe an Auskick or something like that, which typically starts a little bit later, because I'm sure there's probably a whole bunch of developmental research that sort of dictated when kids can and can't play full contact sport. So I guess to answer your question in a less roundabout way, it was like that's literally all there is for kids of that age. Like she can't start nippers until next year. Obviously we live on the beach, so it's fundamentally important that she learns surf skills, but I think what they learn from little kickers is competition. What they learn from nippers for the most part is surf safety.
Yeah.
So it's just I guess about understanding the role that each of these individual sports plays in forming their character. And I like what Max said earlier about like it's actually really it's the responsibility of the sporting bodies. That as a community we can only do so much, but the sporting bodies are the ones who negotiate the broadcast deals, are the ones who negotiate the sponsorship deals, are the ones who can build and craft those narratives around their athletes. That I mean, you look at what Formula One has done. I know it's a male sport, but you look at what Formula One, what Liberty and Box to Box Films have done with Netflix, where they didn't fundamentally change the racing whatsoever, but they've built an entire new fan base out of character-driven narratives. So I think like that, and that's something that anybody can relate to, right? Is when you start to actually understand the characters behind these things. And it's why, I mean, Sam Kerr is a fantastic athlete. She barely played in the World Cup, yet she dominated the entire narrative, right? It's because people were endeared to her character. So I think if we focus on who these players are as individuals and what makes them great beyond the scoreboard, I think that will naturally help this stay the course and not just become this fleeting moment and this like glimmer of hope that we saw that kind of fades away.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. Like you look at the UFC and how that exploded. They were the kings of telling the story of two arch nemesis coming together to battle in the octagon, and you were invested in the guy who was from middle America and whatever his story was versus a guy who was less privileged from Brooklyn, fighting for a black community, and you took a side, and they kept doing those 24/7s in the lead up and built characters. And I think if you look at marketing and branding, like my production company, we pride ourselves in storytelling, and everything is about story. That's how you get people hooked into something that might not necessarily be into. Just like the Matildas, we keep referring back to the Matildas, but the pre-game mini docos on players, and and where this girl came from, a small little country town, and some girl would relate to that, and all of a sudden that's her favorite player. And I think that across the board, you look at skateboarding now, and how it's an Olympic sport, and
absolutely,
and what that's doing, and they're starting to build some great characters out of particularly Australia. And the more of that the sporting bodies can do, they've got to treat themselves like a company, like a brand, just like the Matildas, and market it in a way that gets the reach and gets the attention in an authentic manner.
Yeah, nice. This podcast is brought to you by the new BC Energy. Need a boost? You want that 160 megs of caffeine, 100% sugar-free, 3 flavours, Ice Blast, Berry Burst, Lime Crush. BC Energy is your answer. Whether you're looking to crush a can or crush a workout, Mark.
Raise the bar, raise the can.
Boom. I'm going to drop the big one here. Dads and their daughters playing contact sport. Now, you both played. You muck around with league at all when you were young?
Bit.
Yeah.
Couple of big hits.
Couple of big hits. I just from that shoulder thing you just did. I know you didn't do many. It's a little short, stiff arm there.
Yeah.
Do you have a fear? Because I grew up in contact sport. Like I played league and union on weekends and I was never very good, but I have a lot of things like knees and that now that remind me that I played a lot of that when I was younger. I'm not talking about are they capable or not, because we know there is some incredible female athletes.
Well, the Levi sisters, right?
Yeah, like look, and the Gillaroos. We were one of the first sponsors of the Gillaroos. Just do you? But as dads, because we're doing the dad thing, does that make you nervous when you see that?
Honestly, no. And I think it comes down to the environmental point again, where it's like if you're invested in it and I think because I know what my daughter is capable of, I'm less worried. I know that she can give.
You're making me sound like a shit dad now.
But no, and why I say that is obviously because she understands cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
So like we've really made sure that like we have made a conscious effort with her and with our son as well so that they both understand cause and effect. Our son doesn't understand it very well, but yeah. So and I think it's one of those things where nothing changes if nothing changes. So we can continue to say this, that, or the other, or because of this element of physicality, it needs to be toned down. But does it really? Like, have we ever asked the girls what they want, or have we just made this?
Oh, that's a totally different point. And I know what they want. I've had a few chats with them. They definitely don't want any special treatment in that space at all.
Exactly. So, like, I wonder to that question is like, is it because we still have these kind of older societal takes on things that it needs to be a little bit softer because physically they don't have the same muscle structure as men or anything like that?
What I worry about here is all the research on contact sports like rugby, and I'm talking rugby league and union, for example, is male driven. Like all the sports science just due to what is male driven. Like we talk about, and we're just getting into head knocks now with athletes here and looking at that seriously. There is no special system in place for, like my mum's had breast cancer. And when you ask her, like, how'd you get that? Could have been a knock, could have been this, could have been that, could have been genetics, could have been a whole lot of things that cause that.
Yeah.
There's nothing happening in that space right now to look at and there are some very good sports doctors out there who would be in this, but I just know from a perspective of dealing with these athletes and I ask, what do you wear when you play? I wear this, I tape this, I do this. There's no strategies in place for this. And and I'm just going to go human here, not a male. I worry about that. Like the head collision stuff is never going to go. You're going to play contact sport, you're going to have head collisions, that's going to happen. But you look at the NFL and they wear all this kit and it just means bigger hits and they have less of them than rugby league. But I as a dad, where I was getting to in this space was I do worry that there's not enough, and my daughter is becoming a doctor, like she's close to in that space. So I do worry about the medical side of what we're doing here versus looking at how do we make this a better sport for the females. Like I'm not talking rule changes and money and all that type of thing. I'm talking about, are we putting enough, like the girls aren't even, like you mentioned before, there's not even parity in pay in most of these sports yet.
No, there's not.
So that means there's not parity in sports science, there's not parity in all the things that happen in that area because clubs are run on a budget like everybody else. And I deal with a lot of clubs and I see the contracts that come over and I see how they're broken up and I see all these things. And for me, as a dad that had a daughter who probably missed contact sport due to being in her 20s, she probably could have played it, but she chose surf and all those things in that time. But I sit here and I worry, because my question was, do you worry about being dads and your daughter's playing sport? I worry about the contacts that are happening because those girls play hard footy and what is actually happening to their bodies, because they have very different bodies to males.
I think when you frame it that way, the answer is absolutely, I would worry. And so I'm on the board of a mental health charity and the CEO of our charity. And I was talking the other day because his daughter, she's 16 and she's just made the young Brumbies side, so the women's junior Brumbies side. And I asked him, I said, look, okay, so what do you do for nutrition or anything like that? At the time, he's like, oh, nothing, but we need to kind of get onto it. And
I hear that line all the time.
But now that you bring it up, I think about it and I make that comparison back to, say, a Brumbies Colts side on the male side. I can guarantee you there is a dietitian, there is a nutritionist and everything like that has already been assigned to these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I know from some of the football schools here on the Gold Coast, and I know you've been through there with Kebra and the work that they are putting in to their male sport at that age. And there is definitely still a disparity there for sure that I think does potentially create some risk. So I guess it's more a case of asking the question of ourselves, like within our orbit, what are we in control of, and how can we have a positive impact on this to kind of help get that data, to help create that awareness, to help understand that my daughter is going to go through a physical change once every 4 weeks for a good 30 or 40 years of her life, and that's going to impact her playing ability if she chooses to pursue professional sport. So how does she work that into her training? That's not something that a male athlete has to deal with or anything like that. So I guess, yes, I do worry, but I don't worry about what she's capable of.
Yeah, I worry too. I think like equally like big hits to your testicles could, absolutely ruin any chance of reproducing. And then with females and breasts, like, and particularly female athletes who want to be mothers down the track, and what that kind of impact could have on that possibility down the track. And you said it before, like the reality is, some of these clubs and sporting bodies, they run with certain budgets, and there's just certain things that you just don't have access to, and they barely have enough to get the kits, get them, to every away game, and off you go. If you're looking at grassroots kind of scenario, maybe there is an opportunity there to even like open up opportunities for, like your daughter's, almost a doctor there, like physicians, like nutritionists, whatever it is. Maybe as part of their qualifications is having them on board with the team and having some sort of data collection or looking into that scenario of what could be supported. And that's better than what's currently in place right now if they've got nothing. So at least we're slowly building up, coming up with the tide instead of just, we'll get to that. We haven't got the infrastructure to look at that yet. Here's another thing, like growing up, talking about opportunities, I was a kid from a very working class family, both parents working 2 to 3 jobs each just to keep the lights on, immigrant parents. And, I was on a promising run as a footballer. There was a moment where I'd made, I think it was like an under 13s Australian team that was like $8,500 each player had to pay to tour Europe. We couldn't afford, 3 ice creams on a weekend. We had, me and my 2 sisters would share 2 ice creams. There's no way I was affording $8,500 trip to Europe. So I think back, and even, looking at Tim Cahill's upbringing and being a small player in a system where he was, it was shunned because it was too small for what they thought needed to be a bigger build for a manly sport. And they scraped every dollar together to get him over to England to try and, work his way over through the ranks there, which paid off for him. But right now, more than ever, junior sport in general is so expensive to be a participant in, day out, so season in, season out. And there's so many families out there with missed opportunities because of that. And so that's one thing that I'd love to look at, how we as, business leaders, pillars of society, just dads in general who can make a difference, is I think some focus needs to be put there for sure, because a lot of talent goes wasted, particularly where we grew up. And there's even more so right now. And I think obviously some of the girls that I'm seeing, like coming through Aura's sport, even just the ability to go and get a little, 7-seater where you're picking up the kids because the parents can't take them to the sport because it's 50-60-minute drives away, making them feel like they're a part of a family and a community that they can lean on. I think there's so many like entry level kind of grassroots level stuff that can be done to allow that infrastructure to be there, because at some point when it gets too hard, the easiest thing to do is like, we can't afford for you to play this season, and then pull you out.
That's a good point, but that's still happening at the elitist level in female sport.
Yeah.
We've got a team who we've chosen not to be with next year that would not let us sponsor the female team if we didn't sponsor the male.
Yeah, right.
And that's happening today. I'm not going to drop any names here because that's going to go bad, but it just, I just went, I cannot believe that they're saying this. Like they were physically saying this to us, and I'm thinking, what is going on here at this level? And this is like elite. There is no higher level than the franchise I'm talking about. What you're talking about is fundamentally sport's expensive to play. We really need to, and I agree with you on that, and we should try and work out how we do that and what we can put together in that space. And there might even be some organisations that play in that space already. How we can take away that issue, like to represent your country at any age group in any sport, there should be something in place that makes that happen. Like you can't just run a curriculum and at the end go, okay, there's 23 people picked, they've all got to pay $8,000 each. Like that's not representing your country. What did that do to you as a player?
Oh, it was just, it was heartbreaking to just have to like turn it down and just, give up my spot for someone else.
Who had money.
who had money, yeah.
And that's what's happened in that team I'm talking about. The boys get the money, the girls don't. Like, it pisses me off like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, I can imagine like you said, on a pro athlete level, how much that's impacting female athletes who are needing to have a livelihood and survive, and they're at the top of their game. It's just bullshit.
And because I play in so much in elite sport, I just forget what you just talked about. Like, there must be, 10,000 elite teams, like between city, state, country, every year, that there's this massive group of people who have, it's on the mums and dads to fund that. Yet we listen to the news today and there's no money here. Housing's up, it's costing this, interest rates are through the roof.
I think it's a really interesting thing if you take it back to, like, let's look at it at a fundamental level, right? And this whole notion of prevention is better than the cure. As a society, where would we end up? So this is, I guess, a two-parter. One, in terms of the overall health of our society, if we subsidized participation in sport instead of worrying about, oh, it's too expensive, and so we're not going to subsidize that, but we'll subsidize, say, doctor's visits. And don't get me wrong, like, it's important for people to go and see a doctor, right? But if we put that same level of care into prevention and participation, what would that do to the health system over time?
Yeah, I love that.
And then the second point to this is, if we did start to subsidize things at a grassroots level, what impact would that have on women's sport as well? Because we'd have more athletes going through, and it's probably fair to say, and this is a generalization, I don't have any data to back it up, but if a family's got a son that's showing promise and a daughter that's showing promise in a certain sport, who are they going to choose? So it's like, what can we do as a society to create an overall better and healthier society, but also make sure that the pathways into professional sport are 50-50. And that change really can only happen from a grassroots level up. It's not something that's going to happen top down, because if it comes top down, everyone's looking to take a clip at every level on the way down. And it'll be, oh, well, I've got this program that's more important to my KPIs or my bonus structure or what have you. And it's just like, by the time it actually gets to the people that mattered, and in the case of what we were just speaking about with the women's professional team, that value is so eroded by the time that it actually gets to them, that the intent from the people that are coming into these spaces with sponsorship and everything is usually really positive and really well intended, but they don't have complete control over that. So I think there's and look, maybe it's like, if anyone out there is listening and it is good with lobbying and has experience with this in sport, give us a call, because I think it's fair to say that all three of us are committed to being part of that change and not just sitting here and paying lip service to it because it makes a good podcast topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, even like, you look at surfing, the Matildas, like we work with so many brands, and people know we play in this action sport and sport space. And after the success of these athletes, these brands are asking us to connect with these athletes. It's like, it's too late. We should be talking to athletes or coaches about who the up and comers are, who need the support, to help them get to that top tier so that they get there together with the right support, not jumping on a train that's already on top. That's kind of the thing that shits me with brands a lot, is they want to jump on teams with trophies after the fact instead of growing with them, from the start. And there's a lot of opportunities there with unearthed, undiscovered female athletes that just could do with the support, could do with the bit of sponsorship, or bit of clothing, some running shoes, or whatever it is, to just get them to that point. And by scouting via coaches and other athletes who love propping up their own colleagues, we could do that. And I think the brands have an accountability to do more of that shit, in my opinion.
Yeah, true, very true. It's a tough gig though.
Yeah, I can imagine, because you
got stakeholders everywhere.
Stakeholders, you need your return on investment, but I think some good research, on where to invest that time and energy and some money could pay off.
I think I'd be really, like, you were just telling me the stats last week, and I'll go back to Matildas again because it amazes me.
Yeah,
you were telling me their value had gone up from
so fivefold, so from estimated around 40 million to 210 million over the course of the World Cup.
And do you think that will erode the investment in other female sport, or do you think that'll erode the investment in a lot of sport? Because to buy into that now is a big game.
I think to Mac's point, it will naturally attract people who want an easy win. So in that respect, I think, yes, there will be an element of cannibalization, but I also think what it's done is show the white space opportunity if you get it right.
Yeah. I think we invest in female sport because it is female sport. It is not male sport. It is different, has different characters. It has different traits. It has different outcomes, and it will definitely have a different history. And I think that's the part I love about it. I don't think rugby league is rugby league anymore. Women's rugby league is a totally different game now. Men's rugby league, and that's what I love about it. getting all emotional.
I think it's good. And I think it needs that emotion because to your point, it's fundamentally different. It deserves its own platform. It deserves its own pedestal.
Yep.
It deserves its own fan base, opportunities, everything like that. It is not the support category anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's well put.
Yeah, that's right. It's
really well
its own
put.
headline show.
Yeah.
It definitely is. Like the characters, the quality of the sport, like rugby league quality, like the pace, the back and forth, like soccer, it's now end to end, like men's sport is so technical that it just goes box to box, whereas females is end to end, and you've got, incredible goals every game that you watch, and you've got superstars acting like superstars, which is everything that kids want to get into, and I think female sport at the elite level is creating its own narrative right now. You're right. It's no longer a support act. It's a headline show. And I think that's why it needs its own support system, just like any headline show needs.
It's really interesting. Like, is there anywhere dads can go in this space to get a better understanding on setting pathways for their kids? And we're talking about daughters. How did you come across, was it Little Kickers?
Little Kickers was actually just a referral from friends and from the daycare centre. But I think it's just about educating yourself and just doing whatever you can to educate yourself. I've read this incredible book called The Talent Code, which is all about the environmental benefits for athletes and what it actually does by putting them into specific environments. So there's a whole bunch of research that's been done around ice hockey athletes, and they all end up being born within a certain stage of the year because of the size of them. And what was really eye-opening to me was it's actually not about the genetics. It's actually about the environment. So genetics plays a little bit of a part, but the reason that an elite athlete will have a child that also becomes an elite athlete is because they're taught how to think like an elite athlete. So I guess as a parent, it's like approach your child's sporting goals completely equal, because male or female, they're capable of absolutely anything.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I think like you as a dad to your daughter, you've got this accountability as like almost like a personal coach, where you're there for their, to listen to them. Like you said, athletes want to be heard. You want to hear, are they in pain? Are they over it mentally? Are they kind of like just stretched, and support them on that personal level. And then I think from a professional level, like Kyle said, it's really about educating yourself. If you come from the sport yourself, you've played, you kind of get a good gauge as to like how the politics of it all worked, and the type of clubs or the type of clinics and whatnot that you need to sort of befriend and understand. But I think above and beyond that, it's putting in the time to understand the pathways. And I look back coming through the ranks myself as a kid, my parents didn't have the time to do any of that. And I look back and a lot of the kids that made it through their parents were really invested, like heavily time invested, to the point where they were just making connections both locally and internationally. And it's to that level where you as a dad, and if you're serious about it, you really have to pave that way and put in the time and educate yourself.
Yeah, nicely put, mate. Nicely put. So, guys, how do we find you? kid_Mac on Instagram. All you'll see these days is just posts of my daughters and my family, which I'm stoked about. And hopefully there'll be some future Matildas in the mix of the D'Souza clan. Oh, nicely put.
Yeah, likewise, same with me. Kyle Bullock _ again, pictures of my kids, pictures of my renovations, and hopefully as well a future Matilda. We'll just work out where on field they're starting to make the most money, and that's definitely where we'll be. So expect to see another little Bullock running around up front in a striker jersey.
And I'd say be proud of being a soccer dad. It's a new wave. Everyone grew up being either a soccer mom or like the dad to the son who was just screaming on the sidelines. There's a new wave of, particularly after this Women's World Cup, that we should bond together and talk about how we can pave the way to give our daughters the best chances at succeeding in sport.
Yeah, nicely put. Tough topic. Because there's a minefield out there. Men talking about female sport.
And look, this is purely our emotional, personal take on it. We certainly aren't in a position to talk on behalf of women, but we're passionate dads, and that's what we've given you today. Yeah, and hopefully we came from a point of understanding that it's exactly that. Like Max said, it's three passionate dads who want the absolute best for women's sport to be able to create better pathways for our children.
Bring it on. Thanks for coming on, boys.
Yeah, the
Thank
girls.
you.